He was a boy when he placed his first trade. 12 years old, dirt on his hands, chalk in his pocket, not a dollar to his name. But something was different about Jesse Livermore. In a small town in Massachusetts, long before Wall Street ever knew his name, young Jesse was already watching numbers. Every day after school, he'd run to the local bucket shop, a kind of low-rent gambling house for the stock market, where people bet on the movements of shares. They didn't buy stocks, they bet on whether they'd go up or down. Most men lost everything, but Jesse? He started winning, repeatedly. He wasn't just guessing, he was studying the prices, watching the patterns, the tape, the rhythm of the market. It was like learning the beat of a song no one else could hear. And that song would make him millions and destroy him more than once. But we're not there yet. By the time he was 14, Jesse had made over $1,000, a small fortune in the 1900s. Adjusted for inflation, that's close to $35,000 today. He wasn't even old enough to vote, but he was out trading grown men with families, debts, and desperation. His mother, convinced he was gambling, tried to stop him. But Jesse knew. This wasn't luck. It was discipline, timing, and observation. When he finally made it to Boston and later to New York City, it wasn't with family money or a college degree. He came armed with intuition, grit, and a pocket full of proven trades. Wall Street wasn't kind, it wasn't forgiving, but Jesse didn't care. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to read the tape, ride the trends, and move with the market, not against it. At just 20 years old, he made $10,000 shorting the market. But when the market turned against him, he lost it all in days. That pattern of rise and fall, win and collapse would define his life. Still, he kept coming back, because when Jesse Livermore won, he won big. It was 1907 and panic was in the air. The banking system teetered on the edge. Rumors flew through the streets of Manhattan like wildfire. Bank runs, collapsing stocks, fear. Most traders tried to hold on. Others ran. Jesse did neither. He shorted the market with precision and calm. When it was over, Jesse had made $3 million. That's over $100 million in today's dollars, and he did it in a single bear market. His name spread through Wall Street like gospel. They started calling him the Boy Plunger, a kid who made men rich and bankrupt with the flick of his wrist. He wasn't playing by anyone's rules, he was writing his own. But there was something deeper behind Jesse's success, something more than numbers. He followed strict principles, rules he wrote down, memorized, and lived by. Cut your losses quickly, let your profits run. Never average down. Simple ideas, but brutal to execute, especially when the stakes were millions. He believed the market operated on crowd psychology, that human emotion, not logic, moved prices, that people bought out of greed and sold out of fear. And if you could stay detached, if you could see through the fog, you could profit. But there was one thing Jesse couldn't detach from: himself. Because while Jesse could read the market, he struggled to read his own mind. He'd win, then overextend. He'd lose, then overcorrect. His worst enemy wasn't the market. It was the man in the mirror. By the 1910s, Jesse was rich again, then bankrupt, then rich again. Each cycle more extreme than the last. Then came the 1920s. America was roaring. Jazz echoed through speakeasies. Skyscrapers reached for the heavens. The automobile was no longer a luxury, it was a statement. Everyone was borrowing, speculating, investing. Stocks didn't just go up, they flew. It was the era of easy credit and blind optimism. But Jesse knew better. He'd seen it before. He began building short positions quietly while the rest of the world celebrated gains. He watched as prices soared far beyond fundamentals. Companies with no profits were valued like titans. The shoeshine boy gave stock tips. The taxi driver talked about steel futures. To Jesse, that wasn't progress. It was a warning. And while the country partied, he waited, silently, watching. Then it came. October 1929. The worst crash in American history. In a matter of weeks, the market lost nearly half its value. Fortunes vanished. Banks collapsed. Suicides spiked. It was chaos. But not for Jesse, because he had shorted it all. While the country panicked, Jesse Livermore walked into his brokerage firm and checked his account. He had made $100 million. In today's terms, that's over $1.7 billion. And he hailed as a prophet, a genius, the man who saw the crash before it happened. But something strange happened in the aftermath. Jesse wasn't celebrating. In fact, he was alone. You see, while he had predicted the crash, while he had profited massively, the public hated him for it. Millions had lost everything. And Jesse? He was the man who made a fortune betting against America. The same newspapers that once praised him now called him a traitor, a destroyer, a vulture. But Jesse didn't respond. He knew the truth. The market wasn't cruel. It wasn't evil. It simply reflected human nature. And human nature had cracked. Still, something inside Jesse had shifted. The money was there, but the joy was gone. And over the next few years, something darker began to take hold. Because while Jesse Livermore could master the markets, he could never fully master himself. They called him the greatest trader who ever lived, but no one really knew him. Not the Jesse Livermore who sat in silence while the country collapsed. Not the Jesse who walked through empty streets with $100 million fortune and no one to share it with. He had played the market perfectly, but perfection comes with a price. The crash of 1929 had made him the richest man in the world. For a moment, he had seen the signs, bet against the tide, and won. But what came after wasn't glory, it was isolation. Because while Jesse walked away from the crash richer than ever, America walked away scarred. Factories shut down, unemployment soared, families lost homes, savings, futures. And while the public was busy picking up the pieces, Jesse was alone in a world that had turned cold toward him. The same papers that had once called him brilliant now painted him as a villain. He hadn't caused the crash, but he had profited from it, and that they couldn't forgive. Jesse never apologized. He believed the market rewarded preparation, not pity, and in his mind, he had done nothing wrong. But something had started to shift. The man who had once trusted his instincts above all else began second-guessing. The clarity he had during the crash faded. His timing grew sloppy, his trades less certain. His old rules, the very ones that had made him rich, he started breaking them. He began holding on to losers longer. He started chasing gains. He got emotional, erratic, restless, and slowly the man who had conquered the market began losing to it. It didn't happen all at once. Jesse still had money, he still had fame, but his edge, the cold, calm detachment that had made him deadly on the trading floor, was slipping. And behind closed doors, Jesse's life was crumbling.
His marriage was on the rocks. He had remarried after his first divorce, but his second wife, Dorothy, struggled with his mood swings and obsession with the market. They fought often, loudly, publicly. His sons were distant. Jesse had spent so many years chasing market trends, he'd missed the quiet moments at home. His success had cost him time he couldn't get back. And worst of all, he was bored. The markets no longer thrilled him. The game, which once consumed him, now felt predictable, hollow. He tried new ventures, dabbled in commodities, even considered writing a book, but nothing gave him the high that those early trades did. Nothing replaced the adrenaline of watching a market break in real time and knowing you were on the right side of it. So, he chased it. And in that chase, he made the worst trades of his life. In 1934, just 5 years after making his fortune, Jesse Livermore filed for bankruptcy. He listed liabilities of over $2.5 million, assets just under $100,000. He had gone from the richest trader in the country to nearly broke. Again. But Jesse had done this before. He had lost and come back multiple times. He had always believed that as long as you had your mind, you could rebuild. And he tried. He started a new trading account, borrowed money, wrote a book, How to Trade in Stocks, hoping to pass down the lessons that had made him a legend. But even that fell flat. The book didn't sell. The public had no appetite for stock market wisdom from the man they blamed for profiting off their pain. His name, once revered, had become a cautionary tale. Behind his tailored suits and sharp gaze, Jesse Livermore was unraveling. He moved to Florida, then back to New York, then Florida again, restless, drifting, searching for something he couldn't name. He stopped trading for long stretches, said he was waiting for the right moment, but those close to him knew. He was afraid. Afraid he'd lost his touch. Afraid that the market, the one thing he had always controlled, no longer made sense. And in the quiet of those years, his mind turned against him. He became paranoid, obsessive. He believed people were out to get him, that the press was watching, that the markets were rigged, that nothing was what it seemed. His wife noticed, friends noticed, but no one could reach him, because Jesse Livermore didn't trust easily, not even himself. By 1940, he was a shadow of the man who once made $100 million in a single crash. His fortune gone, his fame faded, his confidence shattered. But still, there was one thing left: his name. He was still Jesse Livermore, the boy genius, the man who beat the market. He still believed, deep down, that he could come back, that one more trade could bring it all back. And so, he dressed sharp, walked with purpose, and talked like a man with a plan. But inside, he was collapsing. One November evening, he checked in to the Sherry Netherland Hotel in Manhattan. A luxury suite, quiet, private. He had dinner alone, read the paper, then wrote a note. It was short, direct, methodical, just like his trades used to be. And then he pulled the trigger. Jesse Livermore, the greatest trader of the 20th century, was dead at 63. The man who made and lost fortunes, the man who read markets like music, had ended his life with a bullet. The public was stunned, but those close to him, they weren't surprised, because Jesse's greatest strength had always been his mind, and in the end, it turned against him. He had mastered the chaos of Wall Street, but he never mastered the chaos within. And yet, his story wasn't over. Because what Jesse left behind would shape generations of traders, investors, risk-takers, people chasing not just money, but meaning. His book would become a cult classic, his life a blueprint, his lessons studied in boardrooms, classrooms, and trading floors around the world. But before that legacy could take root, the world had to reckon with a question. How could the man who beat the market lose everything?
The room was silent. Outside the hotel suite, New York buzzed like any other night. Car horns, footsteps, distant conversations. But inside, Jesse Livermore lay still, gone. The man who once moved markets with a single trade had ended it all with a single decision. When the news broke, it hit Wall Street like a tremor. Not just because Jesse Livermore was a legend, but because his life had always seemed larger than death itself. He had survived panics, crashes, bankruptcies. He had made and lost entire fortunes without blinking. He was supposed to be untouchable. But the markets didn't flinch. The Dow opened the next day. Trades were placed. Profits made. Losses counted. Because the truth was brutal, the market didn't stop for anyone. Not even Jesse Livermore. But something else happened. Quietly. Gradually. Traders, especially the younger ones, began to look back at his life. Not just the headlines, not just the suicide, but the principles. His rules. His discipline. His method. They studied the way he read the ticker tape like sheet music, how he understood crowd psychology before it was even a term, how he managed to stand apart, detached, focused, when the entire market was driven by emotion. And slowly, Jesse Livermore became something else entirely. A legend. A myth. A warning. His story wasn't just about making millions. It was about what the market gives and what it takes away. In the years that followed, his 1940 book, How to Trade in Stocks, began to resurface. Traders passed it around like sacred text. It wasn't a bestseller in his lifetime, but after his death, it became a blueprint. His ideas weren't fancy. They didn't rely on equations or complex models. They were simple, brutal, human. Cut your losses quickly. Let your profits run. Never average down. Trade with the trend, not against it. These ideas became doctrine on Wall Street, etched into the culture of trading rooms, hedge funds, even Silicon Valley startups. But for all the wisdom he left behind, the real lesson was in his life. Because Jesse Livermore didn't fail due to lack of knowledge. He failed because of something deeper. In the post-World War II boom, a new generation of traders emerged. Wall Street was becoming institutionalized, more structured, more efficient. But even in this new, data-driven environment, Livermore's name remained. In hushed tones. In lectures. In cautionary tales. He was the original high-risk, high-reward player, the man who rode waves before algorithms existed. The man who proved you didn't need a Harvard degree to beat the market. You needed discipline and nerve. Still, his story split people into two camps. Some admired him, saw him as a pioneer, a genius who played a dangerous game better than anyone else ever had. Others saw a cautionary tale, a man who couldn't control his own ambition,
who let success isolate him, who chased perfection into madness. And maybe both were right. What set Jesse apart wasn't just that he made millions, but how he made them. He didn't guess, he waited. He studied the tape, he watched the price action. He stayed out of the market for months at a time if the signals weren't right. He believed that cash was a position, that doing nothing was often the smartest trade of all. Try telling that to modern traders. Try explaining patience in a world of 10-second charts and Reddit-fueled stampedes. But that's why Livermore still matters. Because his story isn't just about money, it's about control, discipline, mastery. Not just of the market, but of the self. He understood something that Wall Street often forgets. The biggest danger in the market is you. Your fear. Your greed. Your ego. And when you can't control those, no amount of strategy will save you. That's why Jesse's story never really faded. In the 1970s, a book was written, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It wasn't marketed as a biography, but everyone knew who it was about. The book painted a picture of a man who was brilliant, tortured, obsessive, and right. It became an underground Bible for traders. Still is. To this day, that book sits on the desks of billionaire hedge fund managers, newbie day traders, and financial professors. And all of them, in their own way, are trying to understand what Jesse saw, why he succeeded, why he failed, why, even after mastering one of the most complex systems on Earth, he still couldn't outrun himself. That contradiction, the brilliance and the breakdown, is what keeps his name alive. It's why documentaries are still made. It's why podcasts dissect his every trade. It's why forums quote him like scripture. And why, almost 100 years after his greatest victory, people still ask, if Jesse Livermore had lived, what would he have become? Maybe another comeback. Maybe another fall. Maybe nothing at all. Because the truth is, Jesse Livermore didn't belong to any era. He was too early for computers, too advanced for his peers, too stubborn to fit into any box. But his story, his rules, his legacy, timeless. And in every volatile market, in every risky bet, in every trader sitting at a screen at 2 a.m. trying to decide whether to sell or hold, he's there, whispering the same truths he wrote nearly a century ago. The market is never wrong. You are.
Long after the ticker tape stopped printing his trades and the newspapers moved on from his name, Jesse Livermore remained, etched into the DNA of Wall Street, not as a ghost, but as a warning. Because if there's one truth about the markets, it's this: they don't remember your wins, only your mistakes. And Livermore made both. He was a pioneer in a world that barely understood the game it was playing. He predicted the panic of 1907. He survived the 1919 boom. He foresaw the crash of 1929 before most Americans even knew what a margin call was. He didn't just trade stocks, he traded fear, greed, and the psychology of the masses. While others chased news headlines, Jesse watched patterns. He knew when the crowd was too optimistic and when panic was just beginning to spread. But knowing isn't always enough.
Because what Jesse never conquered wasn't the market. It was the silence after the trade. The waiting, the solitude, the echo chamber inside his own mind. And that's where the real war is fought. For every trader, every investor, every human being who tries to outthink the system. You can master data, master timing, master execution, but can you master yourself? Livermore couldn't. He broke every rule he once preached. He held losers, he ignored warning signs, and he let desperation cloud judgment. And in his final years, he wasn't the man who made $100 million shorting the crash. He was the man who couldn't find a reason to go on. But maybe that's what makes his story real. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a clean arc of genius, glory, and happy endings. It's a raw, brutal look at what happens when someone tries to control the uncontrollable and learns the cost. Still, his legacy remains, not just in books and biographies, but in the way traders think, in the way markets are studied, in the rules whispered across trading desks around the world. His principles, once scribbled in a notebook, now shape billion-dollar decisions. The stock market is never wrong. Opinions often are. It was never my thinking that made the big money. It was my sitting. Successful trading is always an emotional battle for the speculator, not an intelligent battle. These aren't just quotes, they're confessions, because Jesse understood something most never do. Success in the market is 10% analysis and 90% emotion. And if you let your feelings drive your trades, the market will punish you, eventually. His life proves it. So why do we still talk about him? Why does Jesse Livermore matter in a world of AI trading bots, zero-commission platforms, and hyperspeed data? Because markets may change, but human nature doesn't. We still chase profits, still fear losses, still get greedy when we should be cautious, still freeze when we should act. And in that way, Jesse Livermore isn't just a trader from the past, he's a mirror. A reminder that no matter how much money you make, how right you are, how far you rise, it can all slip away if you lose control of the one thing that matters most, yourself. He once said, "There is nothing new on Wall Street." There can't be, because speculation is as old as the hills. Whatever happens in the stock market today has happened before and will happen again. He was right. And that's why his story won't die. Because every time the market crashes, every time euphoria takes over, every time someone believes they've found the secret to beating the system, Jesse Livermore's ghost whispers, "Be careful. It's happened before. It will happen again."